Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought you would give me an easier assignment. The document you have in your hand, it was distributed last night before you left. The title of the document is Recommendations Resulting from the 2018 Annual Council Compliance Action. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is a worldwide body of believers united through the Holy Spirit in Christ's love with a divine mandate to share the gospel in the setting of three angels' messages to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. Revelation 14:6. Writing to the Corinthians, the Apostle Paul declares that there are many members but one body, and adds in his epistle to the Ephesians that in Christ the whole body is fitly joined and knit together. 1 Corinthians 12:20, Ephesians 4:16. Church organization is one of the factors that fosters the unity of the multifaceted, diverse world church. Since what affects one part of the body affects the whole, adherence to the voted action of the church is the responsibility of all leaders. The recommendations in this document are presented in the spirit of Christian love with the intent to respect the voted actions of both the General Conference in session and subsequent annual council actions. In light of their responsibility in these voted actions of the World Church, on June 6, 2019, the General Conference Administration sent out a letter to a certain division presidents requesting their follow-up with perceived non-compliant entities within their territory regarding plans they may have to come into compliance with the voted policies and actions of the General Conference Executive Committee. The recipients were requested to provide their reports and recommendations to the General Conference Secretary by August 22, 2019. Pursuant to that correspondence, no satisfactory response as to major progress was received from the reporting entities listed below. Because of the misinformation about the ADCOM-approved compliance review committees, the General Conference Administrative Committee took an action to use the normal administrative process generally used for receiving recommendations, which is implicit in the 2018 Annual Council action, since the General Conference Administrative Committee may or may not use the compliance review committees. The document entitled Regard for and Practice of General Conference Session and General Conference Executive Committee Actions voted at the 2018 Annual Council provided for a process based on Christ-centered biblical principles to be followed in situations where non-compliance was determined to exist. Based on that document, in matters where non-compliance continue unresolved, inevitable consequences would ensue. These consequences included warnings and public reprimands. As a result of the ongoing non-compliance with the 1990 General Conference session vote not approving the ordination of women to the gospel ministry, the subsequent 1995 decision denying a request for each division to be granted authority to authorize the ordination of individuals in their territory, the 2015 General Conference session decision denying the right of division executive committees to make the provision in their territories for the ordination of women to the gospel ministry. Regarding the practice of ordination, the use of credentials according to working policy, and the lack of appropriate achievements of compliance, the following is being recommended. The following entities have taken actions that are not in harmony with working policy and practices on credentials. A. Danish Union of Churches Conference, TED. B. North German Union Conference, EUD. C. Norwegian Union Conference, TED. D. Swedish Union of Churches Conference, TED. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve this recommendation.
All right, before we, GT, if you can read from line 27 on, because that really is part of the, I tell you what, why don't you just read the entire thing, and then when you make the motion, we're only going to take the first one regarding the warnings, and then after we discuss and vote on that, we will take the second one regarding the public reprimands.
Okay.
But read the whole thing so that they get the context.
Sure. Recommended that the above entities be warned as provided for in the 2018 Annual Council voted document. 2, the following entities have taken actions that are not in harmony with voted actions of the General Conference session and the General Conference Executive Committee, placing them in persistent non-compliance. A. Columbia Union Conference, NAD. B. Pacific Union Conference, NAD. Recommended that the presidents of the above named entities as the individuals representing the non-compliant entity be given a public reprimand as provided for in the 2018 Annual Council voted document. It is further noted that each of the named non-compliant entities have the opportunity to appeal this action through the processes already provided for in the 2018 Annual Council document and the General Conference working policy. In the event that entities that have been warned or their president reprimanded take actions that bring their entities into compliance with the policies and practices of the Church as defined by the General Conference Constitution and bylaws, the General Conference working policy, and voted actions of the General Conference Executive Committee and all General Conference session, recommendation will be made to the General Conference Administrative Committee that these entities or their president be reinstated to regular standing by the General Conference Executive Committee. Redemptive discipline is never easy and often painful. When one part of the body hurts, we all hurt with it as we bear one another's burden. Christ's mandate is to love one another as members of the family of God. In response to his limitless sacrificial love for us. Our love for one another and Christ's church leads us to respect our differences while at the same time adhering to annual council actions and those of the General Conference in session. These recommendations are made in the spirit of Christian love to preserve as far as possible the unity of the church for its end time mission.
All right. Yes. Okay. We're going to give preference to Thomas. Thomas, you can give us your name and where you're from.
Thomas Müller is a German version, but I'm from Denmark.
And you're not too far from Germany.
Last week I went to the airport and I was a happy person. I was going to meet friends and colleagues. I was expecting a good annual council. Then I arrive here and suddenly hear that a warning is on its way. And last night, just a couple of hours ago, we see it in writing. The Danish Union has decided to appoint its pastors because we're trying to live inside policy. The Executive Committee regards policy very high, and we're trying to accommodate inside what policy allows. So at the moment, we are commissioning our male pastors. And is that what we are receiving a warning for today? I was expecting something else of the annual council, and I'm so afraid. I have the patience, and I know the structure of the church here. I have the overview, and I can live with a warning. And as you're trying to say, you're downplaying the warning. The more you downplay the warning, the more I question why on earth are we then receiving the warning. Anyway, I can live with it. But what I'm concerned with is my membership back home. We are alienating them from the world church. We just saw a wonderful I Will Go campaign for the next quinquennium. I would love to come home and inspire my people to be a part of that. But this issue and the way we're dealing with this issue is alienating our members. And I think you know what my recommendation is when we come to vote. Last year at annual council, I was inspired by 2 Samuel, where some of David's people were publicly shamed. Half of their beard was taken off. And that was a shame. So David hides them in some towns until they can come out again. And I'm just thinking, is that really a way we want to work with the church? Is that the way we solve issues and solutions, by shaming, by warning, by reprimanding each other? I believe there's a better way. And I ended my short speech last year by an appeal to the leadership of the GC, the leadership of this house, to dig a little deeper in the toolbox and find other ways of talking, solving, finding solutions. We're here. The executive committee is here and ready for dialogue. We received, yes, the letter in June. We haven't had an executive committee since then. From my officers in the division, they have said all along the time, Denmark is inside policy. So it's a great surprise for me to stand here and receive a public warning.
All right. In reality, the letter that was sent from the General Conference was not a letter or an indication that would start the process. It was only a reminder. The division is responsible, and they, I'm sure, have been talking to you for some time. So the actual citing or indication of those in the list, the 4 entities that are in the list, as it says here, that they are not in harmony with practices on credentialing and the working policy. So to actually set aside and to provide commissioned licenses or some other license is not in compliance with working policy. So, and this is information that we have received essentially from the division. So you may think you're in policy, but in reality, you're not following the policy. And so that's why the warning is being provided.
To have that kind of communication a bit earlier. Did I understand you correctly when you say commissioning pastors is not inside policy?
Commissioning is, but not ordaining pastors is not according to policy. So. Yeah. As I understand it, as we understand it, you're not ordaining anyone.
That's correct. That's correct.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, Victor Marley, Norwegian Union. Mr. Chairman, I have 3 questions, and I'd rather they were not rhetorical, because I believe that the committee deserves some clarification on them. The first one, you have to a certain degree answered who is next on the list, who is next on the radar. You mentioned the 81, 83%, and you mentioned finances, and that may be where the watchful eye of ADCOM lands next. I was just wondering, is there any other issues, any other reprimands or warnings that we possibly can expect in the next years. My second question relates to policy. I want to make it clear to the Executive Committee, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, that if voted, the Norwegian Union is in actual fact receiving a warning for being compliant. We are compliant with Working Policy Basic Principles BA 6005, which says the Church rejects any system or philosophy which discriminates against anyone on the basis of race, color, or gender. And it continues, the Church bases this position on principles clearly enunciated in the Bible, the writings of Ellen White, and the official pronouncements of the General Conference. Further, we are compliant with policy BA 6010 on employment, which says the World Church supports non-discrimination in employment practices and policies and upholds the principle that both men and women, without regard to race and color, shall be given full and equal opportunity within the Church to develop the knowledge and skills needed for the building up of the Church. Positions of service and responsibility on all levels of Church activity shall be open to all on the basis of the individual's qualifications. Now, the problem, of course, is the exception clause in BA 6010, which states, except those requiring ordination to the gospel ministry, in parenthesis. That exception clause strides against everything else that is written in policy and our fundamental beliefs. So I would like some information, Mr. Chairman, on what GC ADCOM is doing to address that inconsistency, because I think therein lies the key. Are we to do away with our basic principles and fundamental beliefs, or are we to do something with the exception clause? Are we an organization that promotes discrimination or not? My third question is this: how does this end, Mr. Chairman? What is your exit strategy? How do you propose that we move on? What we need now are not warnings and reprimands. What we need now is constructive and creative leadership. Leadership that brings consensus, not conflict. Now, I believe that consensus is possible. The Norwegian Union has repeatedly asked for and is waiting for that leadership. We are flexible and we are listening. We're ready to comply with a solution to this policy conundrum. So those are my questions. Who's next? How are you working to resolve the contradiction in policy? And how are we planning to move on from this issue? I recommend to my colleagues here in this room that we perhaps think again before voting this action, because there are these questions and many others that I don't think we have enough clarification on.
All right. Thank you for your opinions, because much of that was an opinion. And I, you know, for me to try and respond to an opinion is a little bit more difficult, and we don't have the time. But I will try to do my best, and there may be one or two others who may wish to help us. Other areas, I already indicated we are looking at the financial areas. There are a couple other areas that may come into play in the future in terms of institutions or organizations that are not promoting and living up to, especially in the area of our biblical understanding of creation. The homosexuality situation is looming large, but we don't have anything at this point where we would have to take action, but we could at some point. So the aspect of discrimination, I think I'll just have to leave it with the tension that you have already indicated exists, because the policy does have that exception. And this body would have to remove that exception, and beyond that, it probably would have to go to a general conference session, because it has been there 3 times. So I guess that's, you know, something that certainly is at the basis of much of the discussion. The exit strategy, I have to tell you, I'm not quite sure. By God's grace, we hope that this body and that all of you, as you leave, will not be so absorbed by what happened on Tuesday afternoon that we forget what happened earlier before this particular item, which was an attempt to help us focus upon the real strategy, and that is a master strategy of evangelization for the entire world. I will go. And I know that when we leave here, sometimes we think only of some of the contentious parts. Annual councils are really full of mission. Now, in terms of the exit strategy, I'm open to the Lord's leading myself, and I think all of us are. Thank you.
I'm Bobby Scholand, or Robert Scholand. I'm the president of the Swedish Union. In the Swedish Union, we have 1/3 of our pastors that are women. And I am extremely proud of each one of them. But it's not primarily for their sake that I stand here today. They, and not the rest of us in Sweden either, are insisting on ordination. They have rather said that even if they disagree, they will still respect the decision that was made in San Antonio 4 years ago. But we in the Swedish Union have clearly come to a point where we, actually in a union session, have said and decided that we need to find a way to treat our male and female pastors equally. Why? So that we can reach the people in Sweden for Jesus Christ. So we have backed off from ordination for both men and women, so that we can say that we are standing behind our fundamental belief number 14, which states the equality of men and women. We are accused of non-compliance when it comes to voted policies. I believe it's important for us to look at the process that we voted last year. I don't believe that we've followed that process to the point where we can say that it's been done in the right way. There are many points that I could bring up here, but we had as one of the major points that the level of the organization that is closest to the perceived non-compliant entity is responsible for the process of working with the non-compliant entity. And in our case, that is the TED, the division leadership. And we've started a process with them. We've had meetings, we've discussed this, and we have tried to follow this process. But this summer, as you have said, you wrote us and said that, well, you have to have it done by this time. I don't think that's the way that it was outlined. It says clearly that we need to take time in prayer, much prayer and dialogue in order to solve this. We are in the middle of that, and we need more time. There's also an appeal process as outlined in that document, which is point number 4. And I have a clear question to all of you here. What happened to that process? What happened to that possibility to appeal the recommendation? When a recommendation is done, me or the perceived non-compliant entity has the right to appeal that recommendation. I got the recommendation last night. I have not had the time to appeal that. What happened to that point that we voted last year? And there are others, but I see that my 4 minutes are up, and I am hopeful that we can go in a different direction than have to go to this way this document is outlining. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Just to make a little response, The action that was taken in 2018 began the process so that every entity and every division would be working with those entities. The letter that was sent in on June 4 was simply to remind the divisions, because the divisions are the ones to work with those entities. The letter in June was sent with enough time to fulfill those specific requirements regarding specific days that were mentioned. So this process also has been going on before the annual council of 2018, when the General Conference itself was working with the divisions and with unions, and we met with you in trying to bring about resolution. So different entities met with, in fact, just about every division in trying to bring about resolution. So we may differ on some interpretations, but we have worked in a very careful way with the divisions. And as I mentioned also, warning only means that you have plenty of more time for discussion. All right, please, go ahead.
Victor, oh, yes.
I asked a question about number 4, though, the process for appeal.
Yes, and you can have that appeal, and that's what the action actually
No, it's
indicates.
an appeal of the recommendation before there is a process of voting.
We did not use the compliance review committee process. So we used a direct process and went directly to the division.
So you've taken away the ability for, or the availability for me to appeal the recommendation. Is that what you're saying?
Even the proposed action here says that you can appeal through the process that is indicated, and is also,
Well, that's when the decision has already been made, but point 4 here says that I have the right to appeal the recommendation.
well, the process we've used is going directly to the divisions, and they knew where we were going, essentially.
Yes, but the recommendation came yesterday, and that's what I want to appeal, according to what we decided last fall. But you've taken away that.
Your division should have informed you of what the approach was going to be.
Sir, I am very disappointed. What we voted as policy, and we are not following that. I am saddened to hear about this, very sad.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we have the northern, okay, please.
Yeah, Werner Dullinger, I'm the president of the South German Union and also president of the Adventist Church in Germany. That's an umbrella organization of public right where both German unions belong to. On behalf of my brothers and sisters of the North German Union, I also would like to explain that the action they seem to be warned for was the best they could do to stay, at least in our side, in compliance with the World Church and to comply also to a vote of their constituency meeting that require them to achieve equality for their employees in pastoral service. Equality is a very high regarded issue in German culture and legislation. What they decided was not to ordain male pastors as long as they work in the field of the North German Union, but just commission them. There are 2 exceptions to this. If the pastor is transferred to another field outside the North German Union, or if the pastor is voted to become president of a conference or union, then they will be ordained. But what really puzzles us as the other colleagues, until 8 days ago, at least to us, no official communication had been took place that the North German Union should get a warning or is even regarded out of compliance. So, a final remark from my side. In the German field, it has become quite silent and calm regarding the issue of compliance committees and organization. We could focus on mission and important things. If we have to go back to our committees with this decision, this will cause, and it already causes, a lot of turmoil. The emotions will rise high up again, and it definitely will not help our members draw them closer to the world field, identify them with the world church. So for the sake of unity and mission, I can just kindly ask this body not to speak out these warnings. Thank you.
All right. Again, let me just say that that which is in our vote of 2018 for warning and public reprimand, and the third item, which is not being recommended, this is something which the body voted. This is not something that we have manufactured. So this is something which was available, and all along, divisions have known that they needed to be working on this. So, all right, we're going to take, I think, yes, we're going to have 4 minutes now because this is representative of North German Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Johannes Nader, President of the North German Union, and I want to add something to what my colleague Werner Dullinger has said to you. In 2016, our executive committee from the North German Union decided, or they voted for a document which was sent to the GC, to the General Conference. And in this document, we describe our position to the issue of women ordination, and as we think, we give good reason, for a good biblical reason for this issue. Since 2016, no one has spoken with us. We got no reaction to this document, and this was 3 years ago. So my question is, what do you mean, and what is our task furthermore that we have to take and to do in this issue? From my perspective, we are in compliance or in harmony with the working policy. We treat men and women equally, and for us, this is a fundamental value, a human right that we think is expressed in the Bible and also in the fundamental belief number 14.
All right, thank you. Again, the reason that a warning is being given to the North German Union is, as we understand it, there is no ordination taking place. It is only commissioning. If people go outside of the union, as has been indicated, they are given an ordination credential. Number 4, please.
But no one has spoken to us. This document was voted in 2016. So for us, it's I cannot understand what is the problem to get in communication with us.
When the item was voted in administrative committee, information was sent to all 3 divisions. That is their responsibility to communicate with you.
But yes, they can communicate with us when you react.
I don't follow you.
Okay.
Yeah. Microphone number 2.
Norbert Sens, Treasurer, Inter-European Division. Brother Chairman, I resonate with what you said in the beginning, that you have been wrestling with that issue quite some time, and so did I. I'm still wrestling with it. And I'm wrestling with it because I believe that still we have not learned how really to process what we have voted last annual council. Regarding the North German Union, I would say they have, to our understanding, or to my understanding, I have to say, they did what they could in order to stand true to what their constituency meetings voted, and also to comply with policy. They have not ordained, but they try to stay within the policy. I think that's what we commend, and where we see that healing could take place in that union over the issues that we had at last annual council. Regarding the process, we have received a letter from you, this is correct, in June 7, but in that letter there was only mentioned the Czechoslovakian Union and not the North German Union. So for us this meant, I'm now struggling, how should we interpret this letter then? If you have not reminded us on the North German Union in your letter of June, in the letter of the Secretary of June 7, why is it not there in addition to that? I'm concerned that we really would give that ample time to discuss and see how we come together on that. But I think this issue, I understand we are all tired somehow of that issue, but I'm also concerned about the integrity of the process. And with that you took that through the AdCom, you basically took away the process, the possibility of appeal. And I think we should have the most fair and transparent process as we can find in such a difficult matter. Thank you.
The appeal process is completely open at any time. The aspect of the North German Union, we had been informed that there was no policy infringement or violation, and then we subsequently learned, this was at the time of the June 4 letter or whatever, and then we learned that actually they were not ordaining people. So we've been in contact with you about that. That is not something brand new for you. Microphone number 5, Elder Paulson.
Thank you, Brother Chairman. Jan Paulsen, General Conference. Thank you. For me personally, this is really a very sad day. Sad indeed. A day for mourning and weeping. We all know that at the root of the issue here is the question of the equality of men and women in the ministries and services of the church. And here we are today being brought to rebuke publicly, stigmatize, and organizations that have acted in the best possible faith, acted in a way which reflect the harmony of the will of God, as led by the Holy Spirit, as they understand it, what is best for the church in their territory where they are. I'm proud of the statements that the 4 union presidents from Europe have made. They know the situation in Europe. They know what the church needs, how the church can be respectable in public, and they want the church to be obedient to the voice of God. It's a struggle for the church to grow, and they are finding the ways that will make it more possible for the church. So I'm disappointed that we have this process. I'm also baffled by the fact that we are here setting in a precedence which will come into force in respect to many other matters later on, when we look at non-compliance in other issues around the world, that we now have started the process of stigmatizing and in this way rebuking publicly individuals. I ask myself, what's the end product of this? Where will it take us? What if they cannot? And we have to remember they have their constituencies, all of them they have to live with. What if they cannot make the changes that some of the leadership here hope for? What is the end product of the process? I fear where this will take us. I cannot see that this is the way God wants us to proceed. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Elder Paulson. May I remind the body that these are the provisions which were voted by this body 1 year ago. And that, of course, is the time at which debate on the appropriateness or not of those items was taken.